All right, let's get started. Just gonna give myself a second to get chat up on the screen so I can see what I'm doing, and then we're gonna jump into Horsehead Weekly, week number 3 for the preseason. You need to not make noise right now. All right, there we are. Perfect. I take a sip of water quick. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Horsehead Weekly, preseason week number 3. I am, of course, your commissionator, Mark, and I am here to have a discussion about the upcoming season, how we're going to handle it as a league, and just kind of go over some stuff with you guys. And we're going to start off with this week's main rule topic is keepers. As you can see, last week we did draft versus auction versus hybrid. A lot of people made good points in the chat saying basically, hey, this is really dumb. We shouldn't be doing this unless we get 100% on board with it, because it's not like it's keepers or an incentive or adding a kicker. Like, this would completely reshape the landscape of what we are as a league, switching from draft to something else. So what we decided instead to do is we would have a demonstration league, which the idea comes from the Olympics, where they have the demonstration sports, which is like, I think in the next Olympics it's, they have a bunch of them, and the idea is, well, we don't think that these should be full medal sports yet, so we want to give them a chance to be a sport in the Olympics, and we'll see if it's worth keeping up. Um, and sometimes these sports end up going on to become something, and sometimes they just die after 1 year because the next Olympics doesn't want to keep them around. So that's what I'm looking to do for a secondary league, which would be like a $5-10 league, something like that. Not a lot of money, because this should be the main focus of everybody's efforts. But just something like maybe like an auction league with like 3 keepers, and we do a couple other wacky things with it, just to see what it feels like. I think that would be neat. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to reach out to me. Reach out in the chat and be like, hey, this sounds like a good idea. I'd like to get, and if you have friends who want to get in on it, let me know that too, and post in the chat about it, because I think it would be cool to have a secondary league that's a lot lower stakes. It's and it's built mostly around the idea of, let's just do some weird and wacky stuff and try it out. Even if it's just for $5, just to keep people honest and caring about it. But so that's what basically happened last week. This week is keepers. Got to go fast at all of that. Recap, blah, 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 blah. Potential Administration League, just talked about that. Draft positions, sorry. So before we get into keepers, we have to go back to draft positions, and they must be submitted by noon on 8/12/19. I will say this in every single one, and I will let you all know in the chat. Please do not make me hunt you down. That's not fair to everybody else. Because I'm not gonna hunt you down. If come noon, I'm just gonna hit the button in my Excel spreadsheet computer algorithm boy, and it's just gonna spit out like, this is how we're drafting. This is the order. And if I don't have your shit by then guess what? You don't get a spot that you want. You get stuck with whatever's left. Um, yeah, sorry, it's just how it works. Um, so yeah, so please submit and make sure you submit as many requests as you have to have. So if you are, fifth, please leave at least 5. More if you're going to get spicy with it and say, I want the pick right before Nick, because Nick's a piece of garbage, and I want to be able to steal all the best people from him when it's coming, when it's coming one way. I mean, hey, some people might have that opinion. Nick, who completely robbed me several times in fantasy baseball this year in trades, not bitter at all. Takes a sip of water. Um, so yeah, so basically, moral of the story for this slide is people please post position preferences promptly. That's all. So for this week's topic, we are talking about keepers. So for those of you who don't know, keepers really are just pretty self-explanatory. You keep the players from the previous year. Now, you don't keep all of them. That's a dynasty league. And even in dynasty leagues, you have so many people who you have to keep, and then and then you can just cut people at the end. At the end of your season, maybe you chop off the bottom 3 or 4 people so you can have rookies that join. You have a taxi squad. We're not getting into all that. We're not going full dynasty. If people want to do a dynasty league, then they can make their own dynasty league and invite me because I think it'd be cool to play in one. That's not what we're talking about here. That's not what we're talking about in the demonstration. What we're talking about is simply keeping people from the previous season, just a couple people. Now, this particular league will not keep anyone from last season. So, if you had just the absolute nutter butter, crazy good team last year, and you're like, sweet, I get to keep 3 of the best players in the NFL because I had 3 first-round picks at the end of the season. No, you don't. You don't get to do that. You don't get to keep 3 absolutely bomb players because this is for this year. This would be the startup of the keepers. We wouldn't be keeping them into next year because that's not fair to everybody who may have traded players that they would have rather kept. People who didn't stay active on the waiver wire as much when they started to go downhill, stuff like that. So that's basically the quick overview of keepers. No keepers, just what we always been doing. Each year you start from scratch, 0 players, 0 going on, you just go. So when it comes to doing keepers, though, there's a lot of logistics. And if we do get the 8 votes threshold to have keepers for next season, and again, if people think that that's not fair, if we don't want to have it be an 8 vote, if you need it to be unanimous, if you want it to be 9 votes, however you want to handle it, we can discuss that more. But for now, let's assume we get those necessary number of votes, and we decide let's do keepers. Now come the logistics. How many players are being kept? What players can be kept? Are there penalties for keeping the players? How long can the players be kept for? And can we trade future draft picks? So, the first question is how many players are kept? This is really easy. Um, do we want to just keep one player and say you get to pick one person from your team last year and that's who you keep for the next year? Easy, sweet and simple. I know some leagues have it be 3 players. That seems to be a nice little sweet spot for some leagues. That's what they found. But then again, maybe because we want to dip our toes into it ever so slightly, and we want to say let's just make it 1 player for now. We just keep 1 player from this year that we're going into the 2020 season. If that's what we want to do, we can do that. We can go bigger if that's what people want to. If people really feel passionate about this and they really want to go for it, we can go and have some fun with it. But that's the first question we have to address. The second question we have to address is what players can be kept. So this is a lot more nebulous. So some things that people consider are things like draft position. So if you are because I know some leagues, they say, okay, if you were picked in the first 2 rounds the previous year, you cannot be kept in this year. That's a reasonable thing to do it. Or you can say if you have an ADP in the first 2 rounds of the upcoming season, as of some cutoff date, they check the ADP and they say, okay, 24 or less, you cannot keep that player. If they have a 24.1, they can be kept. This is a way to keep it a little bit more fair, so people can't keep players that are super super good, and thus just create a dynasty off of the back of, well, I'm just keeping 3 players who are top 5 picks. At least the very top gets distributed because having 3 third-round picks isn't as powerful. Another thing to look at: end of season rankings. Maybe it's they can't be a top five at their position because again, you want those players in the player pool to even it out a little bit. So you have to take somebody who you think is going to make a leap in the next season. Positions. You were only allowed to keep, if you, let's say we keep three people, you can only keep two people from the same position. So, or you can only keep one person from a position. And because we have, uh, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, kicker, uh, defensive line, linebacker, and safety, that's 8 positions. That's not too far fetched to say, well, you know, let's maybe in. I think that's not the way to do it. Is to have it be that. If it's three people, I'd say you can only keep two from the same position. So you take like your two best players, and then if they're both running backs or wide receivers, you take someone from another position, um, or something like that. So that's another way you can limit what players can be kept. Another way, because I did my research. There's a ton of different ways people do these keeper leagues. Traded or waived players, can they be in the thing? Like some leagues say, okay, it has to be somebody you drafted and kept the entire season. And if you don't draft them and keep them for the entire season, guess what? You get nothing. Good day, sir. That's kind of rough. I mean, that's a rough thing to have to deal with. However, on the other side of things, you also can get, people who say, yeah, if you trade for somebody, you get whatever round they were drafted in. Or if it was somebody who you picked up off waivers, they say, yeah, you just have to use like a 10th round pick on people picked up on the waivers. Versus if it was somebody who was drafted in the 15th round, you get them in the 15th. So just a whole bunch of stuff to be thinking about as to what players can be kept. But this is something that we can hash out over the course of the next few weeks. I can bump stuff down a little bit, rearrange some stuff if I need to in this stuff to because I think if we vote to have keepers, we're not gonna be able to resolve all of this stuff right away. So don't worry about it. If you want keepers and you think keepers are a good idea, I say you just vote to have keepers, and we'll work out the rest of this. I'm sure we can come to some kind of understanding for everybody where this works out well. Now, now that we thought about who can be kept, how do you keep them? So what penalties are there for keeping players? So the most common way I've seen is you must forfeit the whatever round the player was taken the previous year. Um, that's just the most common way of doing it. It's a really easy way of doing it. You literally just go, okay, I'm gonna forfeit my third round pick so I can keep my third round pick. That's pretty simple, and it incentivizes people to keep people who they got at a really good value because they end up being lower. Another way to do it is just really cut and dry to say you forfeit your third round pick. You get one keeper, you forfeit your third round pick. That's it. End it. It's super simple. Okay, I mean that's fine too. That's another way of doing it. Another super common way is you forfeit the Xth round before it was taken the previous year. Basically, I draft somebody in the 5th round last year. I can keep them, and it counts as if I drafted them in the 3rd round this year. If I want to keep them again, it's as if I took them in the 3rd round, so then it goes to the 1st round the year after that. And then after that, I can't keep them again because they're already in the 1st round, so they have to go back to the player pool. Also, looking at other things, you also can get things like, yeah, we can keep, maybe you have to lock into somebody being a keeper on your roster. So you're basically chaining yourself to somebody. That's what somebody I work with, they were talking about their keeper league today. They were saying that they drafted Todd Gurley in the 3rd round, and they said, this is my guy. And after that year, this was 2 years ago, they said, yeah, he's going to be the number 1 overall pick next year. Yes, please. I'll lock myself in for 2 years at a 3rd round pick. I'm just going to lock myself in there at 2 years. Now he had the option, if he chose to, he could have said, instead, I just want to lock myself in for 1 year. And locking in at 1 year, he would have had to use a 2nd round pick, but he wouldn't been able to keep him after that year. So he would have went back to the pool. Now he's getting some cold feet about this. Yeah, 3rd round, that's okay value for Gurley. And yeah, it was great for him last year for the first half of the year, but it's one of those things where, maybe we want to do something like that where there's some rolling the dice with it, where you lock yourself into that player. They cannot be dropped. They cannot be traded. They are that player at that position forever on your team. Now we can also adjust it a little bit. We don't have to copy his league exactly. We can say, hey, whoever owns this player at the end of the year, you have to use the pick assigned for the following year. So let's say right now he says, fine, I don't want Todd Gurley at a third round value, but someone in the league is like, sure, I'll buy him off of you for, maybe like a seventh round pick, just to free up that third round pick now for him. So he's basically trading a seventh round pick for a third round pick that's not Gurley. Maybe we want to do something like that. I don't know. I'm just spitballing a whole bunch of stuff here. Hopefully you guys can, come up with other ideas and we can come with some kind of cool consensus about stuff. Now that brings to how long can you keep players for? So in some leagues it's for X seasons. So you only can keep somebody for 1 year, only keep somebody for 3 years. It's just a fixed amount of time that you can keep them for. Others, it's until it's illegal to keep them. So, for example, if you have a league that reduces the round that you have to use. So I draft somebody in the fourth round, then the next year I have to use a second round pick to keep them. So I draft them in the fourth. The following year, fourth round pick. The following year, second round pick. Well, now I can't keep them anymore, so they fall away. So it's effectively forever until it's illegal to keep them. And then there's just forever. So let's say, you get a really dope team, you got 3 keepers, and they're all first round picks the next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that, because somehow you hit the holy grail. Guess what? Cool. You just get to keep them forever. Now, I don't like that myself because that means that teams can just kind of work their way into a perpetual dynasty of foreverness, and other teams aren't going to want to keep playing. They're going to quit the league and stuff like that. So I don't think forever is the way to do it, but it is an option. And all of this unlocks the idea of trading future picks. It's not a requirement, but it's an idea because let's say you are sitting there and you have a player that's very, very good on your team, but you don't have a great team for next year or for this year. So you have this one stud, he's a great keeper value, and you can trade keepers, and the person gets whatever value that great value is. So you're just sitting there, your mouth watering. You're like, oh my god, I would love to trade this guy for some value for next year. Maybe you can get a third round pick out of this guy who is kind of like a rental player to somebody. Maybe he can't be kept. Maybe you've already kept him as long as you can. You can trade that rental player away for something for the next season. Now, this is a whole box of worms because then, people can just say, fine, I'll trade away all my best players to whoever give me the best picks. The next season comes around and somebody's sitting there with 4 first-round draft picks because they traded their way into this insane situation, and they're just sitting there laughing maniacally while everyone has these great keepers, but once the keepers go away, they have the free reign to take whatever they want because they have the first 4 picks in the draft or something ridiculous like that. So that's something that, there are pros and cons to all of this, but again, the main purpose of this week is saying, are we including keepers or are we not? So, plain and simple. So there'll be 2 votes. I said this week. Let's say there'll be 1 vote this week. Are we okay with changing to a keeper league? If we get the 8 votes, congratulations, we have a keeper league. On the other hand, if we don't, we don't. So let's say we get the 8 votes, then next week, instead of doing whatever I had planned for next week, which is website and draft tech, that shouldn't take too long. I can probably go over the website and draft tech fairly quickly and basically just be like, these are a couple websites, these are some reviews on them, this is some draft tech that we can do, and, what do you guys think? Maybe we can move away from ESPN, or we can just keep what we got, who knows. because we don't have to worry about doing an auction, figuring out where's a good auction website. If we have keepers, then we have to figure out what's a good keeper website. But who I don't know. I think it will be fine. Coming up with that very quickly, and then moving on to what rules are governing our keeper league. And I think we can have a nice discussion after we decide the keepers, where we can narrow it down to not we have every different option of a keeper league. What are we going to do? We can just say these are some ideas that people really liked and were responsive to. Let's vote on these particular things, and I'll make pros and cons, and I'll discuss things, and I'll do research, and I'll talk to people at work about their leagues and how everything else goes. So there's all of that. So for now, have a discussion in Slack. Try to figure out how, if, why, whatever you want us to talk about involving keepers. And then Friday, we will vote. I keep on forgetting to change this from which date we prefer. We'll decide whether or not we want to be a keeper league moving forward. Friday, I am officiating a wedding, so I will not be able to run that chat. So if somebody wants to step up and do that, that'd be great. If you don't want to, that's also fine. I'm not going to hold it against you. I will just have to jump on at some point later on in the day and make my voice heard. Maybe we'll have to do it on Saturday or something. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But next week, website and draft tech. If necessary, we will discuss keepers again. And if you have strong opinions about websites, about draft tech, because we want to be, if we're at Malcolm's house, we want a board that we can put on a TV, and at the same time, we also want it to be something that people can get online for in other places, because we don't want people sitting there saying, "Oh my God, I can't access the internet to do my thing," because that just makes people sad. So I will see you guys next week. Thank you guys for stopping by, and yeah, hopefully we have some good discussions and a good decision is made and everyone's happy. I don't know if that'll happen, but I'm gonna try it. So thank you guys for stopping in, and I'll see you guys next week. Peace.